Vancouver sellers, you bought a property 2 weeks ago and valuations have changed since then. And this is something that can dramatically change the way you sell your property today. Well, we talked to our good friend, broker owner, Roland Kym, right after this. Okay, my friends, as promised, today's conversation, we're going to get real with you with the Vancouver market and a little bit of my experience in the Toronto market here. And we're always joined by our good friend, Roland Kym. How are you, my man?
Doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing well. I know over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about both hot markets, Toronto and certainly Vancouver, where you're located. And wouldn't you know it, just in the last 10, 14 days, we've kind of just put a little slowness into the market, a little pause perhaps, and that creates a lot of questions, a lot of woe is me, depending on if you're a buyer or a seller. And talk to us about what you're seeing from the market perspective right now, if you were to look at that Vancouver market.
Yeah, definitely a big difference from a month ago. So we're still long term, pretty close to average sales. We're certainly better than we were last June. However, the market fell over last June and almost everyone stopped buying and selling to a certain degree. In these kind of transitional moments, I think the most painful point are the folks that in a short window of 2-3 weeks, the market changes dramatically from what it has been, and no fault of their own, right? They got, for an example, if you were if you wanted to upsize in the Vancouver marketplace, most people would say you got to find your home first and then list your home. So let's get really clear on what the value is of what you're going to be selling. And up until 2-3 weeks ago, we were able to pretty clearly achieve that value because you were selling and buying in the same market. And we're certainly, and I would imagine you're the same, for many years now, we've been in a market that there's no ability to put a subject to sale in it. So you either have to choose to sell first or buy first. And that's really, that's the emotional toll on oneself when it's not working out, let alone when it's working out, it's emotional. And so what we are finding is, most of our clients who purchased a property as little as 2-3 weeks ago, even 2 weeks ago, and they worked their tails off to get their current home ready and on the market, and they've done a fantastic job, and it's totally different 2 weeks later. And so properties that are priced at a price that we would have seen a couple offers in the past are showing interest or getting interest, but no one's writing an offer.
Yeah.
And so it really causes that internal, stress and pain and fear, and a little bit, like you mentioned, poor me mentality, where you just want it to be easier. And hopefully with the direction of a strong realtor and your own guidance, you can really kind of say, well, as long as I've been purchasing for the right reasons and I have a horizon more than 5 years, I know that, sure, I might have purchased at the current peak, but that current peak will be, retaken in the next 2 years. And so 2-3 years from now, I won't look back and think I overpaid. However, right now I'm in a moment where I need to get my home sold. It's not going to sell for the price I thought I was going to get. So how do I get the sale done, right? And that's a difficult place to be, because it's natural to be like, man, if I was just on the market 2 weeks ago, I would have sold. Or golly, why did I pay what I paid for that house? Even though I like it, I paid too much for it, because 2-3 weeks ago the market was entirely different. And yet no one's going to take that problem off your hand. And so you as a seller really need to, figure out, do we adjust the price, quickly based on what our conditions are and what our completion dates are, or do we make a few small steps, and be prepared that, likely that's going to be a very stressful situation. And it's very difficult to navigate that and be in, good rapport with everyone around you, and not feel like you want to blame someone.
Yeah. Yeah. And hindsight's always 2020, right? Like, you never know what that right decision is going to be at this moment. And I know, we were just talking off camera. Uh, there are moments coming up right now, and in both of our markets, where perhaps, as you just said, if we go list, the expectation needs to be changed from even 2 weeks ago, which is not that long. And And I know I was coaching one of our agents. In fact, they decided as a selling agent to make their decision fast, which I think in this case is a good thing, meaning adjust their price. Uh, but every circumstance is going to be a little bit different. Don't just take that as a broad paintbrush to how you should market your property, but you do need to understand the fundamentals. You know, when you're speaking there, I kind of thought of this. Both of our markets mirror each other, almost identical throughout, the years. And I don't think in the last 10 plus years here, Roland, that we've actually been in just a true balanced market. It's always been one extreme or the other extreme. Is that
Yeah.
similar in Vancouver? Do you spend a time in the middle on a balanced market, or you just kind of go right through it?
Right through it is pretty
Yeah.
much, well, and very little of a buyer's market. Even now, it's still a seller's market. The
Yeah.
challenge is not if you're, if you're a consumer that's heading into the marketplace right now and you want to upsize and you haven't purchased your home yet, it's actually not a bad, it's a great time because, if you go get a great deal on your purchase, then, you adjust your sale price accordingly and, you instead of paying 1.2 for a townhouse, you might pay 1.1, and instead of getting 950 for your apartment, you might get 900. So proportionally the math is relatively the same. The mortgage amount that you borrow is relatively the same, and the home that you sold and the home that you bought are the same. The challenge in a shifting market are the folks that are in transition stage, right?
Mm.
And it's the folks that purchase first, which is typically what you're doing when you're upsizing, especially if you have a family, because you want to make sure you have a place to move into, and in a perfect world, you move in a week earlier than you give your home up. And I feel that pain with clients because it's no fault of their own, no fault of the realtors. Everyone's doing their best job. And literally in Vancouver, North Vancouver, where I'm thinking of a home right now, 3 weeks ago, this house would have sold for two and a quarter. It was listed at 2,199, and potentially looking at offers yesterday. Didn't get the offers, got quite a few people interested. And so there's potentially offers, down the road. But the typical line is, I don't want to compete. And you're like, well, you're not competing. Just put pen to paper. And we're not, we can't push you past the price you don't want. And now that person is, considering, do I stay the course? Do I drop my property by 50,000? Do I drop it by 100,000? Because, in a few months I need the home sold. And so that's the painful one, where that person purchased, committed themselves to a purchase 3-4 weeks ago, and then got their home ready, and the market shifted in that time. And so they naturally feel that they overpaid, because simply stated, they bought literally at the height of the current market. Hopefully they're buying something that, is worth kind of this pain. And truthfully, you're in it, you got to get through it, right? Like, no one's going to take that off your hands. And so if the purchase was strong enough, you won't remember the pain so much in 5 years. You got to
Mm.
focus your attention on, how do you get out of the house without, your current property, without giving it away, without, staying, you can be too aggressive and cut your price too quickly and then get it sold, and later be like, oh my gosh, I should have played that differently. Or you can be too tight on your price, and 6 weeks pass, and you're begging, borrowing for finance and money from other folks in order to get some kind of bridge financing and extra funds. So that's completely a new stress that wasn't in the marketplace as little as 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And it really affects the transitional people that are in the market right now. It affects the people less so if you haven't purchased yet. But it's a real pain that, hundreds of people right now, if not thousands, across Canada, certainly. But, I would imagine in Vancouver and Toronto, we got hundreds of people, maybe a couple thousand in that situation. And,
Yeah.
that's crummy place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you raise a good point too in that transitioning market, which is where we're at right now. We're moving from a seller's market into that balanced market. And I don't think we'll be in that balanced market very long. Um, Yet this is where I find in that first few weeks, or that first few moments, you could call it, when we do shift, when that pendulum shifts, is that's when what's the word I'm looking for? Opportunities arise the most. So as a buyer, you have perhaps some frustrated sellers because their expectations are having to be reset, and now is the moment. I think these next couple of weeks, as a buyer, you have a really good opportunity to perhaps get something more favorable terms than obviously where it was a few weeks ago. Did you see the same thing in the Vancouver market? We certainly do here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's that last a month ago when we had the inflation not going down, it went up 0.01%, like what otherwise would be considered a irrelevant number. Essentially, it didn't go down for the month, and I mean, heck, in on the West Coast, we're paying 2.10 a liter right now for gasoline, and oil's half the price it was a year ago. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So there's lots of factors that are, causing inflation, and not necessarily the real estate, but as soon as that inflation number didn't go down, and then the Bank of Canada, in my opinion, raised the rates too early. But so they raised it the last meeting to our benefit. The Americans didn't raise their overnight rate, and now it's all, in my opinion, kind of predicated on what happens next week on the 26th when the new CPI inflation numbers come out. And if we have a reduction in inflation, I think we're going to like skirt this sideways. If that's the case, again, don't take my advice. It's just my opinion. But if inflation does go down next week, I think as a buyer, this is your best little purchase time window, because I think interest rates should be level. But if it doesn't go down, then I think we will see another interest rate hike. And quite honestly, then I think, it'll be a stagnant summer, because buyers will be, picking at listings to try and get a really good deal. New folks will hold off on just doing the transaction until the fall time to see, what the market is doing. And as I think to myself, pretty much if interest rates go up again, I can take the summer off, so to speak, because very little will be happening. And when you put that in perspective, it's actually very frustrating, because you either have to choose to let a free market occur, or not have a free market. And so, simply stated, an interest rate increase that really was to fix a problem that the government made by doubling the money in the economy over COVID is, it's directly impacting people's plans. And had we just built inventory 20 years ago and let the market balance itself, we prices would be half the price, a third of the price, and there'd be a lot more options, and everyone would be a lot happier.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's that fine balance of, as soon as someone's going to come into a free market and push a lever, there's some winners and there's going to be losers. And it's always, frustrating to see that, because the losers didn't do anything that, other folks didn't do 2 months before. It's just now hitting them. It's penalizing them.
Yeah.
And so that'll be a very interesting, couple weeks ahead. And yet the fundamental, demand cycles and lack of inventory are there. So, it also speaks to how emotional the process of buying and selling is, because, the people who aren't writing offers right now, they likely, my experience, will wait until the market, heats up again, and then they'll put their toe in at a higher price, because human nature is fundamentally more worried about losing on the down cycle than overpaying on the up cycle.
Yeah.
When, from opportunity, as we know, is literally done the opposite way. Like, investors are buying reserved and calculated, but on the down cycle, kind of like averaging down versus buying on the up cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of good points there. The interesting thing, I think if we see the inflation number go up, as an example, next week, that's a decent indication that your interest rate is going to go up in July, right? That, or the next
Yeah.
interest rate announcement. So that tells me if you've got a rate hold and you see that information coming in next week and you got a rate hold, I think those are the buyers that we're going to see in the market over the next several weeks, is those people that already have their rate holds and want to take advantage of that before that rate increases, perhaps into, if they go get a new rate hold and if it expires. So I think we're going to see that. That should be a true tell what happens next week. There's lots of interesting things. And, we were talking prior to jumping on camera here, government intervention works in so many different ways. And unfortunately, it's It's the way I see it. It's always reactionary, which means
Yeah,
you're trying to put a band-aid on a really big gaping problem, right? It, it's it's
totally.
it's it's unfortunate that that's the way it works, but for the moment, that's the way it works. If that's the sandbox they give us, that's the sandbox they give us. We got to be creative with it, right?
Totally, totally. Yeah, so I mean, in closing on that last kind of conversation we had, if I was, a seller that's already purchased a property in this transitional moment, and they happen, throughout our careers, it's, kind of have a little bit of a pity party for a few minutes, and then really get down to business and figure out based on your specific details and parameters at play. That being, how much buffer do you have in your numbers? When is your closing? How much backups do you have? If and then respond accordingly, and probably get more aggressive by sharpening your pencils more on the price than you really want to, because rarely you lose. I see more pain with clients when they later regret that they didn't get more assertive and aggressive on their calculations and pricing 6 weeks ago when they still had 6 more weeks,
Yeah.
versus the folks that are like, man, my house sold. I think I undersold it by 50,000, but the stress hasn't been with me for the last 6 weeks. Just the regret of what did I potentially not get. Um, and so, yeah, really, be honest with yourself, because I find that's where folks put themselves in financial trouble, and then sometimes have to get like literally, it's almost like loan shark level financing in order to close the deal, and it can leave a couple years of pain in the process versus just taking that lumpy medicine faster.
Yeah. And I'm sure we've all been there in the sense where perhaps we've had a listing in the past, you receive an offer on it, and it's the pricing or the valuation just isn't there. And you move away from that offer as a seller, and 6 weeks, 2 months later, that home's still for sale, and you end up selling at a lower price. And we've all seen it before, right? It's just
Yeah.
understanding and when and where to cut your losses or take advantage of what you have in front of you is the way to look at it, right? Like you really, we all know the longer a home sits on the market, the less that home is going to sell for, 9 times out of
Yes.
10, right? Yeah, yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah, yeah. There you have it. So, my friend, there's lots going on. We're going to keep in tune with what's going on in obviously both our markets. It's important when the market moves as fast as it has been, especially in Vancouver over the last couple of weeks. You need to look at it on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, depending on where you are in that buying or selling cycle, and not once a month or not once a year. That doesn't cut it, right?
Totally, totally. It's a ever fluid situation. It seems to be constantly more fluid,
Yeah,
ever
more
changing.
fluid. That's exactly it. So, my friend, how do people get a hold of you?
Real simple. I got a new brand that we're building out. It's called the Canada Wide Real Estate Guy. So you can find that online. Obviously, on the BC West Coast, it'll be myself and my team servicing you. And then we have affiliated partners across Canada that run our systems and that can help you buy or sell.
Excellent, excellent news. So there you have it, my friends. That's Roland Kym, all the way from Vancouver. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody on the next video. Goodbye for now.